Thank you. Thanks. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Steve and the Injury Prevention Research Center for hosting this seminar this afternoon. I can tell you that the MacArthur Award would not have come to Chapel Hill if it weren't for the Injury Center. The Injury Center was really was sort of the catalyst, the place in which I sort of started my career. And through the work that we've been able to do in collaborating with others around campus through our Department of Exercise and Sports Science, it really has been instrumental in I think, a lot of good work by a great team of individuals. So what I want to do is introduce somebody really special to me personally, as well as to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and that's Bob Gefeller. And I can tell you that you're about to meet a very special individual, somebody who has turned a personal tragedy into something very special to try to help save lives. And as you probably can think of some special dates in your own lives when you had an opportunity to be part of something special, or remember the date of your wedding, the date of your first child being born, and second and third children also. You're not forgotten either. They're sitting up here. But I can remember August 20th of 2009. That was the day that Bob Gefeller came by to visit with us for the first time. He was moving his son Robbie into his dormitory at UNC Chapel Hill here, and Bob came by to tell us about his story that he's going to share with you now, and that was the beginning of something very special. It was an opportunity. Jason Mihalik, John and Mihalik, who I think are here somewhere in the room, and their little gal, Jenna, and we sat around the table and listened to Bob talk about what he wanted to do something really special with a foundation that he had already started in Winston-Salem, and to talk about continuing that work here in Chapel Hill. So I feel like I've known Bob my whole life. I told him it's really nice to have somebody whose last name is also difficult to pronounce. I can't tell you how many times I've had a reporter call me, or someone who was about to introduce me at a meeting to say, no, just how do you spell that? And then after I say Gefeller, the F runs right with the G. Then they say, and now can you tell me how to pronounce your name also? So we're the G brothers, and but we're here to tell our story today, and I just want to thank you for having us. Bob, come on up.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and Steve, and Kevin, and the Guskiewicz family, and thanks for coming to this. When Steve called up and said, through Kevin, would you like to come and talk about it, the issue and the opportunity, I would only say yes, because myself and my wife Lisa, we want to do everything possible to help out what's going on in the Injury Prevention Center, and certainly in the Gefeller Center over there in the Stallings Evans building. Kevin waved his hand to our two children here, Robbie and Haley. They're students here at Carolina, so they are rating me today right now on a scorecard as I go through this whole conversation. But first of all, one caveat: if I get choked up, I apologize. This is Matthew. And so Kevin and Steve, they said, why don't you tell your story and what you're doing, and why the Gefeller Center here is so important to what he's doing with all of his work. So I have a video that I thought I'd show you because it's probably the most comprehensive way to talk about the issue. And I would say, taking a tragedy where Matthew ultimately passed away from a head injury, we're working on the triumph. I think we're probably still in recovery mode. His injury was in 2008, August 22nd, so it's a little over, about 3¼ years. But I can tell you that meeting Kevin, Jason, Jonna, Kevin's family, it was saving. And being able to work with him, although we are very peripheral to this whole thing, and his energy is what's driven 99% of the accomplishment, but just knowing we had a place we could anchor and do anything we possibly could to help in this area was what really keeps myself and Lisa going. So this is Maddie. He's a sophomore in high school. He's all fired up because he makes varsity at Reynolds High in Winston-Salem. So we live about an hour and a half away. And he's playing his first varsity football game. It's August 22nd, 2008. And I think they're playing Page High School, which is a big rival out of Greensboro. So all through training camp and two-a-days, Robbie played football at Reynolds as well. And anybody who ever played sports, you know how excited you get when you make the team, and you get the helmet. All of a sudden, he's playing both ways that night. But his passion was linebacker. He played guard and linebacker, and he couldn't care less about offensive line. He was all about linebacker. So before I show you the video, I just got to tell you a funny little story about him. So apparently, Haley was in the stands, and he had two friends who did not play football. And he had made a pact with them before the game. He said, I want you to count my tackles, okay? So he doesn't have his phone. He was a what do you call that? He loved to text, right? But he says, you guys got to count my tackles. So all during the game, and when he's not in, he's turning around, and he's looking up to the stands, and he's doing this kind of stuff, to figure out if he's got the count right. But he was just so excited. So anyway, that's Matt. I'm going to play a video, and then I'll talk a little bit more about all that we're doing. The video covers a lot of it, but there's some things I'd love to accent. So I hope this works. Now, do I have to go? Okay, I'm on it. Okay. So I'll try to do the volume. Can you hear it?
Friday night began with the pop you would expect for the beginning of the season. And the optimism that everyone was undefeated and headed toward a state championship. But all that became unimportant with just under 10 minutes left in the game. R.J. Reynolds, sophomore linebacker, Matthew Gefeller lay motionless on the field. A horde of medical personnel trying to keep him alive.
I remember, I didn't even see the play. I just remember not seeing him go. And looking at Lisa and saying, that's Matthew. And he's not moving.
He was rushed into emergency brain surgery at Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center.
Matthew was really hurt bad.
Neurosurgeon Charles Brandt, he says by the time Matthew Gefeller arrived at the hospital, the 15-year-old already had swelling on the brain. Dr. Brandt says the hit caused a blood clot in the vein inside the brain, causing severe head trauma.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning, we got a call that the surgery was not going well. And so my husband and I went back to the hospital, and it was pretty clear at that point he could not be saved.
Matthew was taken off life support at 9 o'clock that night.
He felt no pain. He did not suffer.
Even though he never regained consciousness after that block in the fourth quarter, Cross says he remained alive, off life support for almost 4 hours before finally passing away Sunday at about 1 a.m. I won't let you down. It's a phrase sophomore linebacker Matthew Gefeller told his R.J. Reynolds teammates and coaches again and again during his brief football career. He kind of like uplifted everybody when he came around. He was that kind of person.
Light up the room when he came in. He just made everybody laugh and feel good.
He was a wonderful, beautiful, passionate young man. And he loved his family. He loved his friends. One of the first things that you do, and you do it repeatedly, is to ask why. And for me, that was really not a place of peace. But the better question became, what now?
Bob and Lisa Gefeller founded a traumatic brain injury research center in Matt's memory at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
1 in 10 high school football players will sustain a concussion in a given season. Unfortunately, 30 to 50% of those will go undiagnosed or unreported.
According to the CDC, there are as many as 3.8 million sports-related concussions every year.
90% of people don't realize how trauma is overlooked. It's not a disease. It's not something that people can relate to. Trauma hits so many families.
About 1,500 children die in the United States So what a worthy cause to really create awareness, because I don't think people really think about the numbers of children that could be helped and maybe the accident wouldn't happen in the first place, or the research could be improved.
At the Guskiewicz Center, healthy athletes are put through mental exams and balance tests prior to any injuries. Comparing results from before and after a brain injury can reveal important clues.
The more pieces of that puzzle that you can put together, you get a better view.
An athlete may not be aware of any symptoms, but test results can be more accurate and help determine how soon an athlete can safely return to competition.
Can you tell me what the signs and symptoms are of concussion?
This year, football players at Mass High School are taking part in this new trend of being tested before the season, ensuring his legacy lives on.
We're just hoping that, his loss can lead to other families who can be smarter, more knowledgeable, and protect their children.
And that sort of helps his spirit live on if we take on the role of awareness, prevention, and treatment.
Okay, so, that video encompasses the journey that we've been on, and I guess I thought I'd embellish a couple of things. My wife, Lisa, she doesn't say a lot, but when she says things about this, she speaks like huge volumes. So, the quote in that video about, asking the question why isn't very helpful, but the what now is more helpful. So you can see, as it relates to the what now, we've been busy. We have a website. It's called MatthewGeffelerFoundation.org. And if you really want to kind of get into the detail of a lot of this, it's all on the website. But the whole purpose of what we're doing is, you heard her say, is around awareness, prevention, and treatment. So when we step back from the accident, we thought, we're just people, we're just parents. How can we help other parents? Well, we can help people be more aware of the issues, from equipment to technique to concussion testing, the baseline testing. Prevention, everything that Kevin's doing and Jason and John are doing and everything happening over here. And I know in all kinds of other schools and universities is all around prevention, the law, the Gefeller-Waller law. I mean, you read that law, it's pretty airtight. So what used to be optional is now really mandatory. And then treatment is, a whole nother realm. So our activity has been around what can we do to raise money for the university, to fund the center. Number one. Number two, that sports safety spectacular. You saw some of that video activity going on there this summer. That was a big event. We brought all 12 high schools together, all varsity teams together. And thanks again to the connections through Kevin, the center, the university. I don't know, we probably had a dozen professional NFL players there, all retired, all driving technique to the kids, blocking and tackling, and they spent the whole day out there. We had the trainers there from the high schools, all the coaches were there. That was pretty magical. I don't know if we'll repeat that again, but it was a great event. I think people learned a ton. And then we had a really special event here that was in May of last year, which was the symposium that Kevin, Jason, Jonna, and their team put together. And that was a symposium held, I think it was at the football center, and it brought in trainers from all over, and they brought in expert trainers from University of Georgia, obviously the staff here, and they spoke trainer to trainer about more than just head injury. They talked about sudden death as it relates to heart. They talked about sickle cell, heat stroke. And so it was more of a larger kind of curriculum for that day. But man, it was awesome. It was powerful. My notebook's about this thick. And so, you know, where we go from here, we try to keep that website posted. We get a little bit of traffic on it. I think awareness is taking care of itself. You know, when Matt was injured, that was the year it all took off in the NFL. That was the year that there were, I think there were 8 deaths in high school. And I will tell you, my first contact with Chapel Hill was about 3 in the morning on the internet. I found the institute that Dr. Mueller ran, the Catastrophic Injury Institute, just doing this. And I sent him an email, and I said, oh my gosh, who are you? And that started the dialogue. That was the introduction to Kevin. And so, you know, he wrote the book. I don't know if you guys have seen the book that came out, but that's a pretty powerful book with all the statistics. So, you know, where we are right now is a lot has happened, and we want to do more for the university. We'd love to see national legislation happen. Kevin's going to talk to you about the state laws in a number of states. But really our core effort is to help the center here do more. So I don't know what that means. Is it if it's more staff, if it's taking the concept mobile, if it's taking the concept to other universities, if it's trying to help Kevin outreach into the community. I think that's been a struggle. It's hard to do because there's not enough capacity. But when you think about these kids, you know, it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. You guys know the stats better than me. You can look at football, you can look at soccer, you can look at lacrosse, right? You can look at hockey. I know Jason and Jonna study hockey a lot. You know, you've got cultural issues about, you know, playing hurt. You've got equipment issues about the way the tests are done and who does the testing and is the equipment, you know, the best it can be. You've got technique. I learned a lot about technique this summer when we ran this event. Buddy Curry and his company, it's called Kids and Pros. It's a nonprofit. Buddy played for North Carolina. He played for the Falcons. He literally runs a nonprofit trying to go around the country, community, to teach proper blocking and tackling technique to middle schoolers. So he helped us out. It was awesome. He's a great man with great technique. I think he's in the retired NFL study of Kevin's. So he's a believer. So there's just so many dimensions to helping trauma decrease. So Lisa, you know, quoted you the 12,000. I think it was 12,000 a year. I'm not sure I got my stats right, but cancer, it's critical. But boy, does it pale, you know, in comparison. And it can happen in any sport. So our thought, perhaps, is, you know, the spectacular was football-centered. I think girls soccer, you know, my gosh, read a lot about girls soccer. Girls who play soccer, it's intense. You know, there might be opportunities there. Our hope is that our high schools in our community might pick up the event and do it again, and then it gets some momentum. We had interest. We had some people at the event from Georgia, and they're kind of working on their piece down there. So it's just really, the whole, it feels like there was a wave in 08, and everything that either some of you all are doing in the audience, you're just helping save lives. You know, so the little "Play It Safe" slogan, I mean, that's all we're trying to do: help kids play it safe. And I like what I see, at least in our local community, about what's happening in the high school. So I hope it's happening around here. So I appreciate your time. I didn't cry. God, that's good. I'm really proud of Robbie and Haley. You know, this has been just beyond impossible. But again, I think we're in recovery. And I hope 10 years from now we can look back at the work that Kevin and his team are doing, and it's global. It's not just in Chapel Hill, you know. So that's it for me. Is that good? So I'd like to turn over to Kevin, you know, because without Kevin and his family supporting him and his team supporting him, you know, I know he's so humble. You know, he never takes credit for anything, and I understand that, and I believe in that 100%. You know, but when you think about a wedge, there's always somebody at the front of that wedge that's kind of driving through. Think about boats that go through ice. Somebody's got to crack that ice and get it moving. That's our man. So, Dr. Guskiewicz, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. And I think what you don't know about Bob is that he does this on the side. He is a high-ranking vice president for Lowe's home goods, and so that's his full-time job, and travels a lot, but yet has so much passion for this, as I think you can see. And so Bob is right there with us, and every day that I walk in the Guskiewicz Center, I can tell you that I know I'm there for a good reason. I think about these significant events that have sort of preceded every step along the way. So, Bob, I really appreciate you being here, and Robbie and Haley as well, because I know this is tough. You have to have moments where this is both rewarding that this is all happening, but also difficult to be part of it. Thanks for being here. So, what I want to do today is walk you through some of the, I think, really important work that's been done, not just here at UNC Chapel Hill, but also some other places around the country, and how it's led to the law. And really, it's exciting that we now have 31 states and across the country that have concussion laws. And it's rare to pick up a newspaper in a given week where we don't read something about this topic. This one from about a year ago. This one from October 16th of this past year. This one from 4 days ago. This one from 2 days ago. And this one, my favorite one, which was published in the New York Times about 2 years ago, because I think the media is helping us. This is and talk about prevention of catastrophic injury. Unfortunately, the average student, the average athlete, the average parent or coach, they don't read the scientific papers that we publish, but they read newspapers, they watch CNN, they watch football games on Saturdays and Sundays. And the media has done a wonderful job of late trying to educate the lay public that these are serious brain injuries. A concussion is a serious brain injury. It's not just a ding or a bell ringer, and if we continue to utilize or use that language, then we trivialize the injury. And a coach may like to still use this language, it's a bell ringer or a ding, but I think we've come a long way, and so you're going to probably continue to see headlines. I hope that we'll see more positive headlines than negative headlines. We've been very fortunate at UNC Chapel Hill. We have built a laboratory around our athletic fields, in our athletic training rooms, and the courts, the basketball courts and hockey rinks. And I like to use this Venn diagram to try to explain how we've gone on this journey. Bob talked about the journey that he and his family have been on, and they're part of our journey now. And we started our work here with some very basic studies looking at the neurophysiology, neuropathology of concussion back about 15, 17 years ago. And now we've expanded into concussion biomechanics. We're studying behavior modification, how we can change behavior. As Bob talked about with the Sport Spectacular, we're now doing it with our own athletes, trying to train them using video footage and accelerometers and helmets. We're beginning, I think, some really important work in education and awareness and how we disseminate this information. Treatment and rehabilitation is sort of the next frontier, and we're headed on that path as well. So while these are all linked together, Carolina is making a difference. And I think that we have an amazing team. Bob talked about all the people that he's met. He's not even met probably half of the folks that really are part of this whole team, and I look forward to bringing him on board to meet the team. But we have a beautiful center that's on the top floor, the Stallings Evans Sports Medicine Center. It's right in the heart of campus, just down the hill from the football stadium. If you haven't seen it, I really hope you'll come by and visit it. This is where we were doing some testing out at R.J. Reynolds. So we've taken our mission and our center on the road. Again, we're constantly trying to educate people about the dangers of concussion. We're trying to work on rehab. We've been known for really validating objective tools for concussion measurement. And there's not a place in the country that does it like we do it, and we're blessed to have an amazing athletic department, an amazing sports medicine staff where they allow us to utilize athletes here as subjects. It's a clinical research program that I think many people around the country are envious of. So I like to toot our horn. I can't always do that when I go out and talk at medical meetings and there's a bunch of physicians from all over the country. I can't toot Carolina's horn, but I can do it in this audience on this day. Steve said it was okay. We really, I think, have been bridging the gap between research and clinical practice, and there's nobody who believes that more than Steve. I mean, Steve's an epidemiologist, and I'll tell you, the best sports epidemiologist in the country, because he, several years ago, and I know he doesn't like me telling this story, but it's about going and getting your hands dirty. He went down to the University of Miami with us and to a number of other universities and actually did the testing with us so that he, as an epidemiologist and biostatistician, can help us sort of figure out what the numbers mean. And so, again, it's just about how we're a special place and how the injury center here has been a part of this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than just to illustrate for you that this is a major problem, and it's not just a problem in sport, but it's a problem in the military. As we know, there was an article on the front page of the USA Today just on Tuesday that talked about there being, we're approaching probably 50% of our returning soldiers from Afghanistan and Iraq will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder when this war is over. And that's a frightening statistic because post-traumatic stress disorder is in many ways linked to traumatic brain injury, not in all cases, but in many cases. And this is a condition which can haunt these individuals and their families for many years. And so we are expanding our work beyond just the playing fields and into to the battlefield. And again, it's looking not just at acute concussion, but also what happens later in life, and I'll touch on that here in a minute. As Bob said, while football has been the model that we have studied this injury, concussions occur in every sport. And these are some statistics, some older ones, but I'll share you on the next slide the most recent updates. But these are injury rates by 1,000 athlete exposure. And it's the best way to track injury rates for any sport-related injury. And you can see that football certainly has the highest in all of these studies, which primarily are high school. These are all high school studies. But the more recent data suggests that ice hockey, that there's an increase in the incidence of concussion in ice hockey, as well as women's basketball seems to be on the rise. And so we have to pay attention to this regardless of the sport. And the 2011 update, this was a paper published by Andy Lincoln this past year, showing again that football, ice hockey, soccer, lacrosse have the highest rates, that competition concussion incidence rates are consistently higher than what we see in practice, which makes sense. It's a more intense environment. And in sports where we have the same rules, with basketball and soccer, it does appear that there's a higher incidence rate in females and also a slightly protracted recovery rate or longer recovery rate in females as opposed to males. The data, we're still trying to identify and figure out the adolescent versus adult rates. It's inconclusive at this time. But again, I think more work to be done on this. When I talk about this, I like to emphasize that I always try to teach this from a prevention perspective, which is fitting for this setting and audience and through this lecture being hosted by the Injury Prevention Research Center. But as clinicians, we always have to be thinking about not only the short-term risks, but also what are the long-term risks of mismanaging this injury. And we really, it's all about preaching what happens if we mismanage this. And you'll see that persistent and worsening of post-concussion signs and symptoms, really we see that in both the short-term and the long-term, because it can turn into a long-term problem. But the second impact syndrome, which the majority of, I shouldn't say the majority, we believe at least half of the catastrophic brain-related injuries that occur on our playing fields are second impact syndrome, meaning that the athlete was still playing while symptomatic from a prior concussion. It's what happened in the Jaquan Waller's case. In Matthew's case, he died of a hemorrhage of the brain. It was not linked to a prior concussion, but those are two different types of catastrophic injuries. And the increased risk for repeat concussions is something we need to be aware of, which we've put together these return-to-play progressions and protocols that really need to be followed in order to prevent that repeat injury. But a lot of these news stories you've been hearing about have more to do with the long-term risk, where we're hearing about retired hockey players, retired NFL football players that suffer from post-concussion syndrome. Some have committed suicide as a result because they fear this depression is going to overtake their lives, and that they're going to end up with dementia and this new sort of new condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which the Boston University group has been studying for the past 5 or 6 years. So I think it's important that we focus on the cumulative risks for youth athletes. Our law will be reaching out to the youth levels with a revision in the next few years. Right now it pertains to just the high school and collegiate athletes, or I'm sorry, the high school and middle school athletes. But I like to borrow this slide from a good friend, Tamara Valovich-McLeod from Arizona School of Health Sciences, where she illustrates very nicely the problem that if we take an athlete, a collegiate athlete who has their first concussion at age 19, compared to a high school athlete who has their first concussion at age 15 or 16, and then perhaps a pediatric athlete, and these occur, that occurs at age 8 or 9. Look at the window of time, opportunity is probably not the right word here, but the window of time for which they are at risk for a subsequent concussion or perhaps catastrophic injury. And so we really need to focus on this pediatric group, and it's been understudied, and I hope that our work will eventually trickle down from what we've been doing at the professional collegiate level and high school level down to this level, but more work needs to be conducted in this area. We had a crisis period in the sport of football back in the mid-60s. Look at the number of catastrophic brain injuries in green, and the number of catastrophic cervical spine injuries in football. And these were fatalities, not to mention the other catastrophic injuries that did not result in a fatality, but resulted in some degree of permanent damage to that individual. There were a lot of rules changes that were put into place here in the early 80s, equipment changes put in place, and as a result, we saw a significant reduction in the number of catastrophic brain and cervical spine injuries in the sport of football. I don't have the 09 and 10 data up here, but they are just slightly higher with respect to brain trauma than what we saw in 07 and 08. And in 2011, we believe that it's also going to be slightly higher. So, and only, I'm talking about 7, 8, 9, not in the teens. But again, still more work to be done. We need to get this down considerably. Real quickly, a concussion, well, how do we define it? It's a traumatically induced alteration in mental status, and very important distinction here, it may or may not involve loss of consciousness. Far too many individuals, coaches, parents, players, physicians, I will add physicians to the list, that still think that if you haven't lost consciousness, then you've not sustained a concussion. Less than 10% of all concussions involve any loss of consciousness, and it really needs to be emphasized. This is a functional injury, not a structural injury. And if you look at how the brain moves inside the cranial cavity, and this is showing it in just one plane, I hope that this will help illustrate why a helmet, a hard outer shell, will not prevent the movement of the brain inside the cranial cavity. We want our cake and eat it too, I always say. We want a hard outer shell that's going to prevent skull fractures and brain bleeds, but we also want something that's soft enough that will manage the energy inside the cranial cavity and mitigate that movement or absorb some of the energy to slow the motion of the brain down. This is an acceleration-deceleration injury, and there's no helmet right now that will prevent concussion. They do a wonderful job of preventing catastrophic outcome. They don't always, they help with concussion, but they don't prevent concussion. A couple of our, what I will call sort of landmark studies that Steve and I published over the past 7-8 years. And this is a large study of collegiate football players that looked at the recovery curve, showing that on average, and along this axis here, this represents the severity of their symptoms on an 18-item symptom scale and how serious or how severe the symptoms were. It's an aggregate or total score, and it tracks them at the time of the injury, at 2 hours post-injury, day 1, etc., out from the injury, and looks to see, shows the recovery pattern. And for the most part, we see that average score getting close to baseline, to 0, by about day 7, but we still see that in most cases we're still seeing some symptoms outwards of day 10, 12, 15. What we know is that from this study that the vast majority of repeat concussions within the same season occur within a 7 to 10 day window. And so this is a period of increased neuronal vulnerability that we really need to pay attention to. We also learned from another study that once you've had 3 or more concussions in a 5-year window, which are the subjects that we see here in this bar, that you're about 3.5 to 4 times more likely. So almost 13% of these players with 3 or more concussions in the 5 years leading up to this study sustained an incident concussion during the study period, compared to only about 4% of those who had no prior concussions. And even those with 1 prior concussion were at about a 1.5-fold risk of a subsequent concussion. So again, I think this was the largest study to show this trend, and one that really needs to be carefully watched. And use that for guiding and preventing future concussions. A lot of this is about preventing or about counseling athletes and parents and coaches. And then this is the last fancy figure I'll show you here, because this wasn't meant to be a scientific lecture. But when we look at the athletes that had sustained a loss of consciousness, those in red, compared to the line in blue without loss of consciousness, we see that they recover very much in the same way on that severity scale. So the higher the score here, the worse off they are, but you can see that the red line is only slightly higher than that of the blue line, suggesting that we can't use loss of consciousness as an isolated predictor of long-term outcome, at least on symptom severity. So again, something that needs to be considered. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about, and just to steal a line from Jason, wherever he's in the audience, come on, he's wearing a helmet. He's going to be, the mouse will be fine. But what kinds of impacts cause concussion? This was a study that we began in 2004 out of a CDC-funded study that we worked on through the Injury Prevention Research Center here. And we said forever we've been focusing on this side of the concussion equation. We've done a wonderful job, I think, and again, not just here at UNC, but several other places, at identifying cognitive impairment post-injury, looking at the neurobehavioral symptoms, somatic symptoms, postural instability, and I think we have that nailed down. But I think we have ignored and neglected the left-hand side of the equation, which really is the prevention side of the equation. How can we prevent the injury from ever occurring so that they don't make it to this side of the equation? And if we do this right, and we begin to learn about the frequency at which a player sustains impacts, not just concussions, but the impacts at certain locations along the head, and looking at the angular acceleration and the linear acceleration, we might be able to help guide helmet manufacturers to design better helmets. We might be able to begin teaching athletes how to behave more appropriately on the field to prevent that concussion from occurring. We might actually change rules. Our study here at UNC helped change the kickoff rule in the NFL this year, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this is really what we're aimed at doing now with this study, and we can do this. We've been doing this at UNC for the past several years, since 2004. We've placed accelerometers in the players' helmets, and the accelerometers feed information to a sideline response unit by way of a radio frequency, and in real time on the sideline, we have a screenshot like this that shows which players, which are highlighted in green here, have just been impacted at what location and at what magnitude. And this has been an amazing tool that we've really, I think our players have benefited from. As scientists, we've benefited from it. We're now working with a company to look to see if mouth guards, there's an accelerometer in this mouth guard. It's called the X2 Impact, BTX2 Impact, and has an accelerometer there. And so we might very soon, if this is validated, be able to measure impacts to the head in non-helmeted athletes, in soccer players, in lacrosse, well, women's lacrosse players don't wear helmets, rugby players, etc. So more to come on this. It feeds the information right into right into your iPhone, into your PDA. So some of our research questions as we started this back several years ago, we really wanted to try to understand if there was an acceleration tolerance for concussion. If so, we had some other questions of interest. Does playing position play a role? Does history of concussion play a role in terms of how hard a player needs to be hit in order to sustain a concussion? And might the impact severity be correlated with clinical outcome? Are those that are hit harder, do they see bigger deficits in terms of cognitive function and balance, higher symptom scores? And can players' behavior be modified? I'll tell you that the answer to this one is no, that the harder they're hit, there's no relationship, at least in our earlier study, to the clinical outcome, which is an important finding, which means that we can't just assume that because they're hit harder, they're going to be worse off. And we haven't yet found an injury threshold or tolerance level for concussion. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I want to spend a little bit of time on, before I get into the law, just talking about what we found after 7 seasons, and show you a few slides just on our behavior modification protocol. But 7 seasons, we see players sustain impacts at about 24 Gs of linear acceleration. Well, what does that mean? The automobile industry has shown that in their crash testing of automobiles, that a car that impacts a brick wall traveling at about 25 miles an hour, that the crash test dummy impacts the dashboard or the windshield at about 90 to 100 Gs, peak linear Gs of acceleration. So these are some pretty high impacts here, and we see players that sustain impacts well above 90, 100 Gs, and I'll show you one of those. The brain can withstand a large number of impacts without clinically distinguishable injury. On average, about 950 to 1,000 impacts in a given season. Fortunately, the vast majority of those do not result in a concussion. But what are the long-term effects? What about nearly 1,000 impacts over a player's 4 collegiate seasons, and then perhaps another 4 to 6 seasons at the professional level? What does it add up to? We also know that the most dangerous impacts occur on special teams, such as kickoffs and punts, and I think this is an area that warrants more attention and more research to help guide decision makers, to help guide rule changes. We also know that these impacts to the crown of the helmet here, of which we see about 15% of all impacts, these are the most dangerous ones. These are the ones that are more likely to result in impacts of greater than 80 Gs of acceleration. Those are the ones that we believe are most dangerous with respect to concussive injuries, as well as loading the head in an inappropriate way. Of the 19 concussions that we've captured to this point, you can again see that the majority of them are to the crown of the head here. And these are some rough numbers. Dr. Marshall always reminds me that these are still rough numbers. They're not, we haven't placed too much on this yet, but we're trying to find, is this, if we place this threshold at 100 Gs of acceleration, well, the early suggestion is that we're about 17 times more likely to sustain a concussion than if that insult is less than 100 Gs of acceleration. So again, this is one of the ways in which we're using this. With respect to behavior modification, what we know is that we can make a difference. We don't have a study on this yet, but we have anecdotally, we've worked with athletes to show this. So I'm going to show you this. This is a 102G impact on a kickoff in a game of this player right here. You're going to see him lower his head. This was a game against Utah back in, it's been about 6 years ago now. It was in the second season that we had the study. I'll show that one more time, but you can see 102 Gs to the right side of the, front right side of the head here. And we noticed a pattern with this player that he seemed to be doing this often, and we've been doing this with other players now where we see that they have this propensity to sort of lower the head and lead with the head inappropriately. And so we will take these individuals and sit with them, show them the video footage, show them what the HIT system, the head injury, head impact telemetry system is showing, and showing them how many of these arrows are showing up on their head. The New York Times actually came and wrote an article on us with this piece, talking about safer football taught from inside the helmets. One of the few positive headlines that have come out of the concussion world of late, and so I hope that we can see more of these. And just an example of how behavior modification can make a difference. This was 4 weeks after this event. You'll see this same player right here, I'm pointing to him. You'll see he's going to come back here and come to the sideline. He's going to rotate his head out of the way. And rather than using the helmet to make the hit, he made that with his left shoulder. And this, I think, is an example of injury prevention. It's taking the technology, putting it in front of the player, and saying, this is how we can make a difference. We just need to do more of this. We study both ends of the spectrum. We've been studying youth athletes and high school collegiate athletes in terms of the acute injury. In 2001, again, through the help of the Injury Prevention Research Center, we started the Center for the Study of Retired Athletes, where we really wanted to try to study the, sort of get an epidemiological snapshot of what these former players are experiencing, and then see if we can't do something about it, see if we can't look at some treatment intervention. We've had a number of studies. We brought well over 350 retired NFL players to the center over these 10 years since we started in 2001. Some of them involved musculoskeletal injury, but the majority of them have involved looking at the late life consequences with respect to their neurodementia and neurocognitive performance. And these are two papers that Steve and I published with our team at the center. The first one in 2005 showing that there was about a five-fold risk of being diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's disease. So you can see the group here that had 3 or more concussions during their professional playing career had about a 5-fold risk, increased risk of developing MCI, precursor to Alzheimer's disease, compared to those with no prior concussions during their playing career. We also interview the former athlete, their spouse, and see this increased risk of early memory or early onset of memory impairment in this group. 2007, we published a similar paper showing that same group of 3 or more concussions during their playing career had a 5-fold risk of being diagnosed with clinical depression later in life, after the age of 50. So as you can imagine, these two studies sent shockwaves through sort of the NFL community. The NFL tried to snuff this out pretty quickly and suggest that they were poorly designed studies. I'm happy to say that that committee that criticized these papers 5-6 years ago no longer exists. They were disbanded. And now there are individuals, including myself, who've been brought to the NFL's Concussion Committee, and we're members of that committee. And I think Roger Goodell, the new commissioner, is taking this injury very seriously. We have also brought several individuals to campus, and we have a current study that's going on right now where we're using very sophisticated imaging technology, which is done right across the road here at the Biomedical Research Imaging Center, the BRIC, where we're finding significant atrophy and decreased white matter connectivity in retired players compared to age-matched controls. And this is an early slide, but we have a much larger sample now. And Again, I think that we're going to find that we're going to soon have technologies such as diffusion tensor imaging to better understand acute concussion and the acute changes that we see in athletes, which is one of the aims of that CDC study where we're studying this with the accelerometers. We're also looking at interventions. You may have heard about omega-3 fatty acid with DHA in it. This has been described as perhaps having a neuroprotective effect for both preventing the concussion as well as then treating those during the recovery period. There's no good science to back this up and support this claim yet, but I think you'll be hearing more about it as better studies are designed. But again, this is one of our goals is to try to help understand what treatments might be available. So as I move into discussing and talking a bit about the law, I want to emphasize that there is clearly an underreporting of concussion, and I hope that we can close the gap on this. John Mihalek, who's part of our research team at the Guskiewicz Center, has really done a wonderful job of focusing in on this area. Our dissertation focused on looking at the effects of whether coaches and athletes can be trained about concussion and educated about concussions, and then whether it's translated in the right way. And this is really an important area of research. And when you see statistics like this, 75% of athletes surveyed didn't know the signs and symptoms of concussion in 2003. I'd be surprised if that number right now was even anywhere near that. I hope that we're down well below 50% now, and that this number of 50% of high school football players going undiagnosed or unreported, that we're closing the gap on that as well. Some of John's work is really looking at sort of coaching education. We know that they can retain we know that they can be taught the information in terms of what the concussion symptoms are. It's now, can it be translated to the right, to the level of the player? We shouldn't see statistics like this when high school athletes think that the coach would be upset for reporting a concussion. This is not sort of where we should be. We can't afford to see headlines in the New York Times such as this: high school players shrug off concussions and the risks of playing. These are real quotes from athletes. It's not dangerous to play with a concussion. You've got to sacrifice for the sake of the team. The only way I come out is on a stretcher. Couldn't let my team down. It's our job as researchers, clinicians, coaches, parents, policymakers to spread the word. Permanent brain damage can be a result for not reporting a concussion. Ending up with a second impact syndrome. You could be out of school for months, you could never play sports again, and if you don't believe it, you only need to tell the stories of some of these athletes who have died of a second impact syndrome. And it sort of emphasizes the importance of this. Telling the story of Zachary Lystad as we move into the last part of this presentation on what the law really has meant. This all started in Washington State around 2006. And this is Zachary Lystad's story, and I've met Zach. Zach was fortunate enough to be one out of every two with a second impact syndrome survives. But 100% of those who survive have permanent brain damage, some of varying degrees. And Zach was 13 years old, playing middle school football, and just a few plays before halftime went down without a loss of consciousness initially. There was official timeout, he was removed, and he returned back into that same game then in the third quarter. Played the third and fourth quarters, and then collapsed at the end of the game in his dad's arms. And to hear, I've heard Zach's dad tell his story, just as we heard Bob today tell Matthew's story. And I can tell you that his dad's as passionate as Bob is about making a difference. And in Washington State, they decided they were going to make a difference. And the Lystad law was needed, and this is, I'm quoting Dr. Stanley Herring on this, who's a good friend of mine. He's a physician at the University of Washington and a team physician for the Seattle Seahawks. If you ever have a chance to hear Stan talk about how he got involved in meeting the Lystads and making something positive out of, again, another tragedy, he talked about really that education was going to be important, that there was really no stickiness as Stan talks about it, to just the education alone, that there needed to be a law, there needed to be some teeth in this thing, there needed to be consequences for not following the best practice guidelines. And so they attempted to really make these changes through the law and put a team of individuals together, just as we did here in the state of North Carolina over the past year and a half. And sort of the ABC, sort of the patchwork of policies and procedures from school district to school district. They went around the state of Washington building up support for this law. And I will tell you, they have a good law in Washington state, but I think Stan Herring would tell you today, if he were standing here, that we have an even better law in the state of North Carolina. Now, that's in part because we came much later. We came a year and a half later, 2 years later, really, in terms of the law being passed. But and so we had that added benefit of having a little more legwork there and a little more research. But the key components really are education, and it has to go beyond just educating the athlete. It has to go to the parent, the coach. Here in the state of North Carolina, every middle school and high school athlete and coach and athletic director must, and parent of those athletes, must read the concussion fact sheet, sign a disclaimer saying that they have read it, they understand it, they know it's their responsibility to report it, and that goes on file as part of the school's policy, their emergency action plan and concussion policy. They have to institute this policy as well as an emergency action plan that goes beyond just concussion management, but thinking about how we manage a potentially worsening situation in a catastrophic event, also including things such as heat stroke, cardiac sudden death, and heat-related illnesses. Removal from practice or play on at the time of the suspected concussion, and no same-day return to play. That's paramount in these laws. And that the medical evaluation and return to play clearance must be by a health care provider with training in concussion management. One of the reasons why our law in North Carolina is better than the law in Washington State, I think Dr. Herring would tell you if he were here, is that we've defined who those individuals are and what's required in order to return someone to play. So, two unfortunate headlines here. The one of Matthew's death in August of 2008, and about a year to the day before I met Bob on August 20th of 2009, and a few weeks later of Jaquan Waller. From this, something really positive happened. Gefeller-Waller concussion law, June 16th, 2011. I can tell you it was a special day. You can see Senator Dale Falwell, who is a personal friend of the Gefeller family. Another amazing person who fought for this. This happened during a difficult session, one in which we have a Democratic governor that was battling on a lot of issues. Some of the Republicans, Senator Falwell is a Republican. This is a great example of people coming together for an important cause. This passed unanimously at the House level, the Senate level, and then the governor signing this. You can see Jaquan's brother, sister-in-law, and nephew, and you can see Lisa, Gefeller, Bob, and Haley here for the signing. It's just a very special day for all of us here in North Carolina, and this will save lives. There are now 31 states. The Gefeller-Waller law was number 21. The state of Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago became the 31st state. And I can tell you that states 22 through 31 have been following what we've done in North Carolina, which is something that I know Senator Falwell, who is a sponsor of the bill, and myself and others here are very proud of. This is part of it. I've already mentioned the education. This now hangs. There's a concussion education. These hang in every locker room, athletic training room, hallway of all the collegiate NCAA Division 1, 2, and 3 schools, the NFL locker rooms, and we do the same thing now at the high school and middle school levels. This is the responsibility of everyone. And I'm sure I've missed people on this list, but this is it takes a community to make a difference on this, and I think that we're well on our way, and a lot of it has to do with the research. So in conclusion, this is our message. I call it our Gefeller team, and every time Bob and I email each other, we say have a Matthew blessed day, and we know that Matt's sending this message out along with us. A culture shift has been set in motion, and we're making a difference. Concussion education is the key. We have to continue to train people on what the red flags are, because if we treat every one of these head injuries on the field or on the court or on the ice as just a typical concussion, you might miss a red flag where that athlete's headache is worsening, or where they have a pupil that's not responding in the same way to light that might be indicative of pressure being placed on a cranial nerve in the brain. You may miss a sleep disorder that's suggesting that there's still something more seriously developing. You may miss cognitive changes that are affecting them in school that turns into something more serious and perhaps something catastrophic. We need to establish an objective, comprehensive evaluation and standardized return to play protocol. The Injury Center here, the Injury Prevention Research Center at UNC, has been instrumental in helping us to do this, not just for the past 3 or 4 years, but for the past 17 years. Think beyond the acute trauma. Equipment and safety and behavior modification have to be handled together. We can't just rely on that piece of equipment that's going to create this false sense of security with our young athletes. We have to modify behavior, and I do think the state laws will make a difference. We have an amazing team, and I don't have everybody up here, but this is Jason Mihalik, Julianne Schmidt, Jonna Mihalik, along with Matthew's picture outside of the Matthew Gefeller Center. But we have many other students, some grad students who are here today that are doing great work in this area as well. And I can't thank the Gefeller family enough for all that they've done to help make a difference. This is on the day that we dedicated the center with Robbie and Lisa and Bob here. I believe Haley was at a had an important tennis match that day in Winston-Salem and was not here. But we're doing great things here, and together we'll continue to make a difference. So thank you.
Kevin and Bob, thank you very much. It's really, I think, a great story to be told here about how the great research engine of this university can help find its direction in the community. And it's humbling, I think, to think laws are not the end of the story, but 5 years ago we had no laws anywhere in this country. Now we have 36. I've got some microphones. I'm going to pass them around. If people have some questions, maybe they can, maybe Kevin and Bob, if you'd take a few questions. So are there any questions from the audience at all?
I work for a Southern University press. I was really struck when you put that map up there of states that have laws. And once again, how many of the states that don't are in the South. And I wonder if, have you run into anything as this word spreads that you can, any conclusions you draw about how that's happening that way?
I mean, I think that there certainly are states that are recognized because they have centers like we have it, or they have major universities and initiatives that are here, and they have legislators that are out there fighting this battle to try to get this approved. There, unfortunately, I can tell you, and I'm going to go back to that slide real quick. Yeah, right here. If you keep going back. There, I gave a lecture down in the state of Florida back in June, and they are really struggling here in Florida. There are, you want to talk about politics? I learned a lot about politics as Bob's friend Del Falwell told me that I would as we went through this and set on this journey. In Florida, they're having issues with a number of different subspecialties that want to be built into the law that say they should be allowed to return players following concussion. So it's become a, and so they're struggling with that. They had a legislator there who was a chiropractor who felt that chiropractors should be allowed to return these players back to participation, and he's also he's in their Senate, and so he pretty much had it shot down apparently, and so they're struggling in Florida. I know that South Carolina is working toward it, and what we have found is that a lot of times the bordering states, whenever like right now, I just gave a talk at the Cleveland Clinic this Tuesday. Ohio, you see that they've got pending legislation. Whenever Pennsylvania got theirs, I can tell you that Ohio, especially since they're sandwiched there between two states that have it, they're going to push like crazy to try to get it over the next 6 months. So I think they'll get there. The problem is you've got South Carolina, they're lagging behind a little bit. Georgia, they're having issues again with their scope of practice with who can and can't release folks. And so yeah, it's a bit alarming because they have nothing pending right now. So that's been my experience, is there's still some turf battles. Bob, I don't know if you're talking to Dale or...
I don't. I know that we did have at the Sports Spectacular in July, we did have people from Georgia that were interested in all the activity that we were doing. And actually afterwards, we sent them a packet of everything that the law and everything we'd put into the market, but I've not heard from them since.
I think we'll get there eventually. They may be watered down laws, but I think they will eventually get there. And one of the challenges also is how far-reaching are the laws going to be? We want to get ours eventually to include all youth sports. The problem is that was asked is who's going to police it? If we say that all Pop Warner leagues and Little League Baseball and youth soccer has to fall under the Gefeller-Waller law, who's going to police it? So that's why we started, and Senator Falwell sort of guided us through, and he said, listen, let's get it done at the high schools and middle schools because the Department of Public Instruction will police it, and then we'll work it down to the other levels. So I think we'll get there.
Yeah, that follows up with this question. So we're ending the first football season, high school season. Have you guys done any evaluation or looking into how the law was implemented?
Great question. I can tell you that I believe that the reported incidence of concussion is up. It has increased in the state of North Carolina. And the CDC recently called me and asked me to comment on a 60% increase in the diagnosed concussions in emergency departments within the past 5 years compared to a 5-year period from earlier in the 15 years ago. And I said, they expect that to be a negative headline. That's a positive headline because it's diagnosed, just like the reported number that we see in North Carolina this year. While we don't have the exact statistics, we're still running surveillance on that. I believe that that's going to be a positive thing. And we've seen a lot just through people, through the athletic trainers and physicians in the community here.
I would tell you one other thing too. When we put on this Sports Spectacular in July, we required all the coaches, every kid and parent had to be signed before they could come. We thought it was going to be one of the biggest hurdles in the event. It was one of the easiest things we did. And they had all the paperwork. They had to hand it in to register. If they didn't have every kid signed, they couldn't participate. We only had one school out of 12 that kind of fell out of that. So it was a powerful start, I guess.
I have a question that is related to Alan's previous question. In terms of the surveillance activities that states do, how similar or how different they are? Because I presume...
It's nowhere near what it should be. We need much better surveillance programs for at the high school level. And after I comment, I'm going to ask Steve to comment because he's our surveillance expert. And I think that what we're going to try to do in North Carolina here is that any return to play clearance form that is sent back to the school, it has to be submitted to the North Carolina High School Athletic Associations. They have an individual there who handles health and safety, and so she will be tracking those over the next 3 years, and so we'll be able to see what's coming in at least, and we'll be able to track it that way. But I personally think we need better surveillance systems at the secondary school level. Steve,
we do, and we also, enforcement is just so key to any legislation. So without backing up with it, and so surveillance can be an enforcement tool in a way. So the two things go hand in hand. I think this is where you do the research to help the law get better. So yeah, we've got.
And I think along with that, the other studies that are going to need to be conducted are the ones that we can now go back after we've been requiring coaches and parents and athletes to read and understand the concussion fact sheet, and to go back and conduct some of those studies similar to what Jonna Mihalik did as part of her earlier work, to see what does it mean, to sort of to follow up and see if it in fact it's working. The translation of the information.
I'm a lacrosse coach, middle school and high school, and what are the most effective ways of really conveying the message to kids and educating about concussion prevention? I found the slide with the brain modeling to be very, very effective for me.
So one of our goals through the Gefeller Center is really to try to do more on-site education. Again, I keep mentioning Jonna. Where is Jonna? Is Jonna here? She's out with the baby? I thought you were doing that. Okay. Jonna did a great job this year of getting out to some of the schools and doing what we call these huddle talks. And so I have to credit her with that. It was her idea. She went out where at the end of a practice, and she did this mostly after football practices before they started hitting, when the parents are asked to come and pick the kids up 20 minutes early. So we have a huddle talk. Coaches, everybody down on the knee with kids and parents around, and just going through some of the facts and talking about what a concussion is, what are some of the myths about concussion, what to look for in your child if they have a concussion, because it really needs to be heard by the parents, the coaches, the athletic training staff, athletic administrators, etc., and to sort of just start the word out. I think it can't just be shoving a form in front of them and saying, okay, here it is, read it, sign it. So that's one of my ideas, sort of that's how I'd answer the question, Bob. I don't know if you have...
Yeah, I'd love to answer just maybe a couple other thoughts on that. Being a parent in that situation, again, our other two children as well, athletes, and having played sports, no knowledge of any of this, zero. So I got a couple of thoughts that we gave to our schools. Boosters, PTA, great opportunity to get in front of those meetings. Information sheets, as Kevin said, get the parents tenacious on it. And then the other thing that was really powerful, and it came from Kevin and his team, is these trainers, and if you're a coach, the trainers seem to be subservient to the coaches. If you would change your frame of reference and adopt your trainer as your partner and give them the authority in front of the players to do this kind of work, make sure that the players are listening to them, both preseason, during season, etc., I think that would have a huge impact. And in fact, again, working with the Winston-Salem schools, as some of these coaches, you could see it in the coaches in July when we had them at this event. There were some coaches that were with their trainers, engaged the whole time, and there were others that were not. And you could tell a marked difference in the attention of the kids.
I'd like to speak to that because I want to tell you what we did at Chapel Hill High School this past summer, because I wasn't even aware that this law had taken effect, but our trainer was. So we invited Johanna, is that her name?
Johanna.
We invited her to come, and she spoke. And we required the coaches required the athletes, and coaches are your key because they can require athletes to do things better than parents can. They required the athletes to attend after practice. Always provide food. That's important after practice. And we asked parents to please attend. She gave this concussion talk, and we did all the paperwork then. So we definitely had a big impact on our football team at Chapel Hill High School. But additionally, I have to say the trainer is key, and our trainer, a high-quality trainer, and that's another place that I'd like to see something happen, legislation or something, where you require that the schools have high-quality trainers. We have an outstanding trainer that on our field, and he will see that unusual behavior because he knows the athletes, and he will pull them aside and test them right there on the field so that we can know if we need to pull them out. It's been real effective.
I will tell you that the first round of this, when we put this through, we asked for a funded mandate so that it would provide money, salary for an athletic trainer in every high school across the state of North Carolina. Unfortunately, we're only sitting at about 40% of all schools in North Carolina have certified athletic trainers. That's up from 33% about 4 years ago. So we're moving in the right direction. the funded mandate, as you can imagine, coming during a time where the economy, the situation that we're in. But it was a $22 million request that we just couldn't be met. But I couldn't agree more. They are the quarterback of the sports medicine team there in terms of getting this whole program and instituting the concussion program.
Could I add one other idea to you, because you're so active in it? You know, there's some theory and debate out there, no trainer, no football. So I don't know about, you know, the parents raise all kinds of money for the boosters and the PTSAs. You could fund a trainer from all that money. The trouble is, where does all that money go? I can tell you from Reynolds High School, we raised a tremendous amount of money. And you do wonder, well, where does it go? Lights in the parking lot, et cetera? So I don't know. Maybe there's some parents that will stand up and say, you know what? For X thousands of dollars, we got to have a trainer or we're not going to play these contact sports. I mean, I think that would be very powerful.
I had a question about the sort of ethics of this. I'm a fan of football and I'm a fan of science and brain science, and I have a hard time watching football knowing what the dangers are. So I don't know what you as a parent think, or do you watch? Are you still a fan?
Barely. So that's a great question. It's very difficult. Lisa's from Oklahoma. She's an OU grad. We got a cousin who played center for the Sooners. Robbie and Matthew played Pop Warner from the time they could throw the ball. But now, you know, it's very different. So in an instant, everything changes. Again, your view on things change. It's very hard on Monday at the office. Very hard on Friday at the office. You know, people are talking about football. So I try, and I think we try collectively. But Matthew would say, Dad, you got to go watch football. I loved football. So we go watch football. But I think getting back to what we're trying to do with Kevin and the foundation, and please go to our website, knowledge. Knowledge is power. And if parents and players can understand these issues, then they can play a lot smarter, better prepared, better equipment. Everything Kevin said, it's just, the thing about it is it's such a journey. Kevin showed you that slide of all those deaths. That's like 50 years ago, right? And so tremendous progress, but not really. And then you've got a whole culture there around the coaches and the players. You saw the quotes from Kevin. So it's going to take a while, but I still love football. I'm still proud of all that they did in football, but it is hard because when I watch, I worry. You know, I worry about all those kids out there playing. When I see an injury on the field, it's devastating because, you know, Matthew didn't have any chance to make it. So he's an angel. So I'm at peace with that. It's Zachary and the thousands of children that are now mentally impaired for the rest of their life, all because they loved a sport. That breaks my heart. And spinal injuries as well. So.
Hello. I work in a small charter school. I'm a nurse, and I was under the impression that we would not have to comply with this law since we're a charter school and many of our teams are not part of the league process. So can you address that? I mean, are we have to comply with this law?
So you did not initially. So what happened is that it applied to the 392 public schools systems and schools, high schools, and then all the middle schools that fall under them when it was put in place June 16th. But what the North Carolina private school organization did, and I'm not sure who heads that up, but they decided several weeks later to adopt this. And so while I don't think that you technically have to by the state of North Carolina, but whatever organization governs those private schools in the state of North Carolina.
We're not a private, we're a public.
Oh, you're a public charter? Then you do. Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, even though you're not playing in a league and does this cover the children in the regular course of play, playing soccer and basketball, like pickup basketball, during school hours? I mean, we're not covering that at this point, correct?
It's a great question, and it does not. It applies to organized sport at the high school and middle school level, but given that all of this information is out there in front of every principal has to sign off on this and post everything in a place, the emergency action plan and all of this in places so that everybody can see it. I would only hope that the school nurses and the physical education teachers and anybody that's involved with that would be up to speed on it and comply with it.
Last question what about all the injuries, traumatic injuries from skateboarding, bicycling? How does that figure into all your statistics? I mean, you're focusing on football and contact sports, but I hear a lot of traumatic injuries.
Sure, there's some great, very informative information if you go to the CDC's website that lists sort of what we call recreational sport. So that's an excellent point. It's not just about organized sport. So we see the emergency departments have really good information and data on the number that they see. And if you think about it, there are a lot more skateboarders out there than there are Pop Warner football players or bicyclists. And I always emphasize the need to wear a helmet for those recreational sports and to train parents to try to monitor their child after they've had a suspected head injury.
So we are at time, and our speakers will stick around if you have further questions, but please join me in thanking them. Bob,